Hello, welcome back to this channel. This is where we talk about a supposed contradiction in the Bible. So there are a lot of these supposed contradictions in the Bible. One of them that people like to bring up quite often is the genealogy of Joseph, the husband of Mary. So in Matthew 1 verse 16 it says, "And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ." But in Luke 3 verse 23 it says, "And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as it was supposed, the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli." So one passage seems to say that Joseph's father was Jacob, and one seems to say that his father is Heli. So who really is the father of Joseph? Well, I've heard some claim that Jacob and Heli are the same person, just maybe a nickname or something of that sort, maybe a surname, something like that. However, if we look at Matthew, there are 28 generations from Joseph to David. However, in Luke, there are 42 from Joseph to David. So Heli and Jacob simply cannot be the same person because the genealogies just do not match up at all. So which one is right? Is there a contradiction in the Bible? Well, no, there's not, and here's why. So why don't they match, right? Why do they not match? Well, I believe that Luke is following Mary's lineage while Matthew is following Joseph's lineage. And I have a few reasons for believing it. One, Matthew claims that Jacob begat Joseph, thus making him the biological father. Two, Matthew goes a step further and tells us that this Joseph is the same Joseph that married Mary. So it would make sense to believe that Matthew's line is Joseph's biological lineage. Three, Luke claims Joseph, which was the son of Heli, which was the son of Mahat, which was the son of Levi, etc., but never does seem to claim that Joseph was physically the child of Heli. An important thing to remember is that a husband and wife become one flesh according to the Bible. We see this in Genesis 2 verse 24. Genesis 2 verse 24 says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." We can also see that Eve, other than 4 times, is called either the woman or his, Adam's, wife. And there could be others, but she's not often called by her name. And 2 of the 4 times that she's called by the name Eve are in the New Testament. So really, whenever you look at Eve in the Bible, she's not really called Eve. And so she's generally called the man's wife or the woman, something of that sort, not really Eve. And so it really does seem that a husband and wife become one flesh, like God said. And I would even like to look at Genesis 5:2, where God calls both Adam and Eve by the same name, Adam. Genesis 5:2 says, "Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day when they were created." This is most likely what is going on in Luke's record, since God sees a husband and wife as one flesh and calls them by the name of the husband, right? We see Adam and Eve. Eve was called Adam, right, after her husband. And so in the same way, it's very possible that Joseph here refers to Mary, because Mary and Joseph became one flesh, and thus Mary would have been seen as Joseph in the eyes of God. And so it would be correct to call her Joseph, especially whenever God's the one doing it through the physician Luke. And so why is this important? Like, what can we take away from this whole thing? Well, a lot of people claim it's a contradiction, but really it's not. It's really quite clear that, especially when you take Genesis 5 verse 2 and you realize that Eve is called after the name of her husband, Adam, then you can realize that, oh, well, Mary would have been just called after Joseph. And it really just lays it all out, and it's just very simple. It's a really simple explanation, honestly. And so it's just good to know kind of how to deal with these arguments, because there's no contradiction there. It's just not a good reading if you take that as a contradiction. And so we know from this that there's no contradictions in the Bible, just that man reads it wrong sometimes. And secondly, if we follow Joseph's line, we have a few generations of kings. We have King David, King Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, and Josiah. And then we have Jeconias, which might be Jehoaz, and then who begat Shealtiel, who begat Zerubbabel, the one that we read about in like Ezra, Nehemiah, and those post-Babylonian captivity books. We hear about Zerubbabel, right? So Joseph was not too far off from the royal line, and Jesus would have been called the son of David because lawfully, through Joseph, he would have been considered the son of David. And it would have been pretty easy for someone to say, okay, they think that he's born of Mary and Joseph, right? They think that Joseph is the father. They go through Joseph's genealogy and they say, okay, he was part of the royal lineage, and it makes sense. And then, so lawfully, he would have been considered, Jesus would have been considered part of the line of David. Thirdly, Mary was also from the lineage of David. She came from David's son named Nathan, probably after the prophet Nathan, who said, "Thou art the man," right? And funny enough, Nathan actually is one of the children of Bathsheba. We read about that in the Chronicles. And so she was a descendant of David through Nathan, his son, and because of that, she was of David. So not only was Jesus lawfully from David through Joseph, his adopted father, his on earth, right? But also he was physically a descendant, a son of David through Mary. And so instead of it being a contradiction, these passages actually show us how Jesus fulfills prophecy in the Old Testament. And so only the Bible can turn passages that supposedly contradict and make it fit a fulfillment of prophecy. That should show us that the Bible is not just some other book, but is a divine revelation from God. Now, if you notice, I referenced Genesis 5:2, where it talks about Eve and Adam both being called the name Adam, right? Eve was being called after her husband, right? However, many modern Bibles corrupt this verse, and they replace Adam with man or mankind. And when they do this, they are making the Bible contradict, as they have no basis upon which to understand that a wife is called after her husband's name in order for Luke 3 to be about Mary, right? So in Genesis 5:2, New King James says, "He created them male and female and blessed them and called them mankind in the day they were created." NIV. "He created them male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created." ESV. "Male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created." CSB. "He created them male and female. When they were created, he blessed them and called them mankind." The NASB. "He created them male and female, and he blessed them and named them mankind on the day when they were created." So as we see here, in all of these modern Bibles, they call just Adam and Eve both, they call them mankind instead of calling them Adam, right? And then, so we don't have Eve being called after her husband's name, meaning that in Luke 3, it cannot have been about Mary, because Mary, we have no basis to say, oh, well, the wife is called after the husband's name. We have no basis for that in Scripture if this verse does not read Adam like it does in the King James, which just shows that the King James is superior to all of these modern Bibles. And so with that, I will see you guys in my next video.